You're listening to episode number 9 of The Road to 7 with Sheila Cummins.
Welcome to the Road to 7 podcast, guiding and supporting entrepreneurs along their road to 7 figures and beyond. Here's your host, Sheila Cummins.
Melissa Durrell is the president of Durrell Com. Beginning as an award-winning journalist, Melissa reported the news from Toronto, Ottawa, Saskatoon, Sudbury, and Kitchener-Waterloo for nearly 2 decades before founding her own startup. Fueled by great ideas, she has grown Durrell Communications to one of the top communication firms in the region. Melissa has worked with hundreds of startups, entrepreneurs, VCs, and angels across Canada. She uses insider knowledge to gain local, national, and global exposure that tell the amazing stories of her clients and get the word out. Join me today as Melissa and I talk about the role activism can play when you grow your business and how she has single-handedly grown from a company of 1 to a team of 8 high-producing PR and communications experts. Melissa, thank you so much. When we talk about busy women, I would say you are the poster child for people who have more going on than ever thought to be humanly possible.
Yeah, I love to say full, not busy. Full. My life is full.
Life, I love it. I love it. Melissa, take us back to the early days. You were a journalist first. What was that trigger that made you start Durrell Com?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been telling stories for CTV, which is the major network that I worked for the majority of my career, and I'd worked across the country. So in metropolises like Sudbury and Saskatoon, and then Toronto and Ottawa, and I had I'd been in Kitchener-Waterloo, which is considered a B market in across our country. And was really looking to what the next steps were for me as a journalist. I loved storytelling. It was my passion. I loved interviewing people. I loved telling, getting into the nitty gritty of what was going on in our communities, and politics, of course, was my passion. And the journalism field was really changing. And I mean, that's an understatement in 2018. But at that point, things were really starting to move from, when I started in journalism, I had a photographer, an editor, a producer. By the time I left, I was shooting my own videos, partly responsible for some of the editing of them. I had to do all the social media posts. I had to write a digital story. I mean, the job was 7 people, and burnout was real. And but I still loved it, and I loved talking to people and connecting with them. And my career took a little bit of a side turn in the sense that I actually ran for politics at that point, and I was elected. So I became the city councillor for Waterloo, and which is a town of about 130,000 people in Ontario. And I represent the urban core. And it was a fantastic job. But of course, right after that happened, a lot of the politicians I interviewed were picking up the phone and asking me if I would start to media train them. And so that sort of was how the company started. Not sort of, that's exactly how the company started. I started working with some politicians, provincial and federal, and some municipal, on how they speak to the media. And so quickly, the entrepreneur in me was like, oh, this is a business here. And that was pretty much what I did for a year. And I attracted a few smaller businesses that wanted to tell their stories, and who I'd met through the stories that I told in the past. And hey, here you're out. Are you willing to take me on as a client? So I had a couple of small companies at that point. A lot of them didn't have big marketing budgets, and that's really how I started realizing quickly that growth was. This could be the business. But it's funny because when I look back on it, my joke was all of a sudden, as I started my own company and I was a politician and I loved both jobs equally, my joke was always, one of these days I'm going to have to grow up and pick a career, because I was really riding both of those jobs, and I have been for the last 8 years. So I think I'm finally ready to grow up.
Well, I have to say, I know you started as a solopreneur with the media training. Tell us a little bit about the evolution of Durrell Com. It's had a couple different turns along its journey. Yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah, we love to call those pivots in the tech business.
Pivots.
Well, it was actually the tech industry that was the game changer for me and my company. I ended up working for an organization called Communitech, and Communitech is really one of the diamonds in the crowns of our tech space in Canada, I would say. And at that point, they had just launched a new program called Hyperdrive, and essentially they were looking for companies across Canada, but there were some American, we had some international companies, and they were coming in, and the idea behind Hyperdrive was, you've got an idea, you might have a little bit of revenue, you might not, but we're going to take your company into Hyperdrive. And they brought me in and was a presentation coach, essentially. So a lot of these are the engineers, mathematicians. They're great with numbers, not great with speaking. And so I was working with them on how to craft their story. And the big sell, of course, is they were all going for investment funds. And so these tech companies oftentimes have a great idea to scale to and to scale up to a point where they can actually make some money. They're usually looking for between $200,000 to $1 million to scale their company to that next level. And so they brought me in to start to talk to them about how you tell your story and how you ask for money. And, there's a bit of not an algorithm, but there's an equation that goes along with it. What's the problem you're solving? How are you solving it? Why now? What's the market look like? And so I would sort of take them through that pitch and help them really present it in a way that they could ask for $1 million. If that's what they were looking for. So that was a big game changer for me, because I was they're inspirational CEOs, founders of these companies with like amazing ideas that like blow your mind. And so I was working with dozens every single new group that came through. I had another dozen tech companies, just inspired by them. And for me, as a former journalist, I became, I researched the heck out of investment pitches. And I think, I think to this day, I'm one of the only women in Canada who coaches on investment pitches. And I think, I'm well over close to $100 million I've helped companies raise over the last couple of years. And so that really became a sweet space for me. And what it's great about it too is, I worked with these companies on how to tell their stories. Yeah. They weren't in a place yet where they were looking for communications and media help. But a year or two later, all of a sudden their companies are making some revenue, they're making some money, and they realize that traditional media and communications plans are something that they really need, yet they didn't need it in-house. Mm-hmm. And so many of them have come back to me, and many of them still remain my clients. So that's been really exciting too.
What made it safe for you to go and make that big move? Or was it a big move?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think when you do things you love, it's really easy. Mm-hmm. And I love working with people on how to tell their stories. And so when I made the jump into that tech space, I loved every minute that I worked with these companies on. And so it was at that moment I was like, this is really where I need to be. And I'm doing really good work. And I loved every minute of it. So I think in that sense, it was really it was an instinct to follow that path. And I still every day when I was just working with the cutest clients today. And I say cute in the most respectful way. They're 77 years old. They're great grandparents, and they've got a really cool idea for a company, and they want to launch it. So whether you're a 24-year-old mathlete or a 77-year-old great grandparent, people have great ideas and they struggle with bringing it to market. And so, for me, I love working with them because, that's my secret sauce, is I can hear a bunch of ideas of why your company is great, and then we can string it together and make it into a story, which is essentially what I did as a journalist for 15 years. And now I'm just doing it in that sort of marketing comm space.
Right. Fantastic. So you experienced a pretty quick growth curve. You were 1 year as a solopreneur. Mm-hmm. Who was your first hire?
My first hire was a young lady named Jordan. And she came to me. I wasn't looking for full-time. I was just looking for part-time at that point. I just needed help. Some of my clients, after we talked to them about how they tell their story, they wanted to do some social media around it. And it was not a good use of my time to be doing that social media when I could be, when I'm working with the CEOs on their storytelling. So I knew I needed someone to take over that sort of I need to delegate that task. And so there's 2 universities in Waterloo. So, never ending amazing talent. And, one of the talents that I look for is a university degree in English, because people just aren't being taught how to write anymore. And so she came to me through a friend always, right? Like, some of my best hires are friends of a friend. And so she worked for me for almost 2 years, I think. And in that time, I scaled from, 1 to 2 to 4 to 5. So she was great. At the end of the day, it was still sort of an entry-level position. That was really one of the struggles I have, is getting to that place where, there's that mid-level and higher level salary positions. And I think a lot of small businesses struggle with that. How do you scale people up? I think I'm finally figuring it out.
Yeah, well, it's a scary spot when all of a sudden you're shifting from having a contractor to having somebody who's working full time, and there's that financial commitment to pay them every month, and you're their livelihood. It's a huge shift. Was there any internal beliefs that you've had to attend to, deal with, rewrite, however you want to position it, that has allowed you to make that leap? Because that first move is a leap of faith.
It is. It was interesting. When I was a journalist, I loved what I did, but I was a horrible employee. And I know that now. I actually called one of my news directors once, and I was like, wow, I was tough. I was a tough employee. And I think, instinctually, I've always been a better boss than an employee. But the problem was, when I was younger, I didn't have anybody to be a boss for.
Yes.
So I think for me, that was a big part of growing this company, was learning sort of those leadership skills and how to mentor and inspire my team, whether it was one employee or whether it's, 8 employees. But figuring out ways that, we can all work together. We're all part of the same group. And, specifically in my business, we're the voice of our clients. We're their, a lot of them, they have a very hands-off approach when it comes to their social, their media, all of those things. And so we are their voice. That's a lot to take on. And, I'm really inspired by the people that work with me now, because they really get it, and they care about the companies as much as they care about Durrell.com. We want our companies to succeed. And that's tough. I mean, hiring is really tough. That's probably been one of the toughest, toughest jobs as the president.
So I know you've recently taken on a new client, which has really pushed the boundary of storytelling for you and shifted you much more into the advocacy role. Tell us about that experience and the impact that it's had on your business growth.
Absolutely. I'd love to. So as a female leader, as an elected official, there are very few female politicians out there. And so I took on a real role to try to get more women involved in politics. And because of that, I think that sort of raised my profile in the sense that when 6 million women marched around the world for Women's March in 2017, and we caused a lot of racket and got a lot of attention, Women's March didn't just live in America, it lived globally. And because of that, Women's March Global became an incorporated, essentially nonprofit. And so when that happened, I started to work with Women's March Canada, and I actually am a board member on Women's March Canada and help with some of their strategic communications. And Women's March Global came to me at that point and said, we really need to figure out how we are going to align this world around women's rights. I've always considered myself a feminist. And an active one. And I think that, a lot of us, just by being who we are, we're representatives of what women can do in the roles that we are. But there's an even a greater, task that we have to do, and that's to, help the younger women up this ladder because, I always love that analogy of, you pull someone up from below and you pull them up ahead of you, and we all continue to do that. And I think really what happened, Women's March Global said, like, we're going to create a global platform, which is womensmarchglobal.org. And we're going to connect the 6 million women that marched around the world, and we're going to connect them on this platform. And that, to me, is incredibly exciting. It's really powerful. And it's for those of us in the women's movement who sometimes feel very isolated, frustrated, I think, is a really good word to describe these days when we have premiers like Doug Ford and presidents like Donald Trump. I don't like to even say his name. We have a prince in Saudi Arabia who still is allowing male guardianship to occur. We had a vote in Argentina where they're actually voting on whether women can have abortions or not. I mean, there's still so many issues around this world that we need to step up. And because women aren't in those representative roles where they're making the laws, we're still being ruled by men who are making decisions on our bodies and on our lives. And that, to me, is so wrong. So Women's March Global came and said, look, we want to broaden our profile. We need to have a global platform. And to me, it's probably one of the clients that I literally so jazzed when I wake up in the morning to work for them, because we're really doing some amazing work in this world and partnering with some incredible organizations who have been around for decades. So that's really exciting. Organizations like Equality Now, who have been doing incredible work around human trafficking, and they're partnering with Women's March, and we're working together to really make a difference in this world. And gosh, I have this incredible business coach named Sheila Cummins, and one of the things we talked about was, what do we do? And, at the beginning of this podcast, the beginning of the podcast, my one-liner was get the word out. Yeah. And that's still what we do, but now we amplify change makers. Let me say it again. We amplify change makers. And I think that truly that's inspired by Women's March Global, but it's inspired by my tech disruptors. Right. It sort of really showcases who we are as a company and where we're growing to.
Oh, I love that. And I love that has shifted into your tagline.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting for people listening that when you do make that leap and align your clients with your core values and what you stand for, that line between work and play becomes so gray and faded, and it does nothing but amplify what it is that you do and strengthen your company. Tell me a little bit about what you have experienced exponential growth over the last, I've known you for 3 years now. I think we've worked together for 3, and I've known you for just a little bit longer than that. But what's had the biggest impact for you on your business growth, other than those key clients where you just said, yes, this is what I'm all about?
Oh, great question. I think for me, a big part of it was I did the work at the beginning with the investment pitch coaches with a lot of those tech companies, and now they're coming back for media support. That's been a big one. Mm-hmm.
So let's just go there for a moment.
Yeah.
They worked with you on pitch coaching, got them results.
Yes.
How did they know, how did you make that shift to then saying, oh, well, now they're going to need media training? At what, that to me is such a beautiful example of knowing your audience and being one step ahead of them and having a solution to a problem that they have.
Mm-hmm. I think a big part of it for me was when you're talking to the media, you have to have, and I use this term all the time, but a sticky story. And a lot of the times when we were talking about the problem and solution that many of my companies were solving, that's our sticky story. And so I think that because we created such a strong story that people would remember, and they acknowledged the fact that I was a big part of working out what that story was and is, they want to come back to me because we can do it again. And whether we're reworking that that old story into making it something a little bit more slick, or whether we're telling a new story because they may have pivoted, that trust and that I think it's really trust around we can say anything, we can blue sky, but at the end of the day, we're going to come up with like a story that people are really proud of. I always love to use the Oprah aha moment, like you're brainstorming, we're talking about stories. Why does this matter? I go back to my old journalism tricks around like, why will people care about this story? And so why will people care about your company and what you're doing and all those things? And then all of a sudden you get this moment where it's like, yeah, this is what journalists are going to want to talk about. This is what your customers are going to want to talk about. And so that's really where we come to. And I think because we create that, when we build their investment pitch, they'll come back to me to do it again because it worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it. For me, it's so one-on-one. I'm so in people's worlds and faces. I joke sometimes I'm a counselor. I'm a marriage counselor. I've got a couple tech companies that are husband and wife teams. But you get to a point where you really build these amazing relationships with them. And I think that's a big part of it too. And then I do a lot of speaking, and I think that that's a big part of it as well. So, being one of the only female pitch coaches, and I think a lot of tech organizations are seeing that, wow, we can't just have 5 men on a panel anymore. We need to be diversifying. Oftentimes I'll be that token female, but that was a big shift for me too, is taking the one-on-one work that I was doing and taking it to a larger scale. So a room of 100 entrepreneurs at Mars in Toronto, or, Communitech at one of their events, Innovation Guelph, to 60 entrepreneurs in training. And so doing some of that training into the masses, and then speaking on panels. And I think too, especially with Women's March Global, the work that I do around training female politicians directly impacts my company, because women see that what I'm doing and trying to inspire them to be leaders, and then they want to come to me and talk about that and what that looks like for them.
Do you think every company has a story?
100%.
How can our listeners start digging into their story?
Well, my old journalism trick
is,
for me, a lot of it is, why should people care about what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
My news director used to say that all the time. I come in to pitch these political stories, and his line to me was, "Nobody cares about politics, Melissa." He was wrong, but anyway, as I said, I'm a better boss than employee. But anyway, when I pitch him stories, he'd always say, "Why should I care? Why should I care? Why should the older couple that lives at the corner outside of the news station, why should they care about this story?" And doing that gut check every single time you start to ideate on a story, right away whether it's going to fly or not. So that's a big part of it. I love the founder stories.
Yes.
So why you started your company, oftentimes for most entrepreneurs, this is a problem that they wanted to fix,
yes,
and they found the solution. So that founder story is really a good one. You can do, the detective kind of story where, you have to really take people through the journey of what you are doing to get to the point that this is the solution that has to be there, but you take them with you, and it's about investigating. The perfect world pitch is a great one, because, if you're changing the world, you're going to win a pitch competition. So really those are the climate change stories, the health tech stories, those kind of stories where you're actually going to be making, if you can save a life with your device or whatever it might be, people are interested.
Yes.
So, that's always a great story. The disruptor story. So this has never been invented before. So, there's a couple of different story ideas that I can bring into them and say, I think you're aligning with this kind of story. Let's dig into it and see if we can do it. I've got the Joan of Arc story, which is, you're saving the world from mundane tasks and that kind of thing. So, you're not changing the world, but you're fixing payroll one day at a time, for small businesses, so you can have some fun with it too. And some companies are really willing to go that extra mile with that personality, or else, depending on who they're marketing to, we might change the story up a bit, but it's always super fun.
I love it.
Yeah, the company has its own personality, and I think that's really important for every company. It's not just the founder's personality, because one day that company will be far larger than that founder. So what is the personality of the company, and how do they tell stories, and who do they talk to, and that kind of thing.
What have you found for you, for Durrell has been the best way to get your story out?
For me, absolutely, it's speaking. Yeah. Speaking and panels.
Yeah.
And even, if I'm on a, what do they call it? The Fab Four, I'm on a panel on the radio and I'm talking about anything on the news. People are hearing my voice and the way that I'm speaking. And if I'm doing a good job at it, which most of the time I am, if I've had my 4 coffees, they're like, wait, I want her to tell me how to talk. Right. So taking really difficult and complex questions and ideas and trying to take them into a place where people actually understand what you're talking about. And that was my job as a reporter. And so it was instilled in me, and now I can teach other people how to do it. So I would say the panels, discussions, the radio interviews, the keynotes, all of those really impact my company, because people are attracted to, they want to tell their stories and they want to talk to somebody who can help them with that.
Yeah. Good on you. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned over the last years in business? You've had exponential growth. You're running a huge communications firm, lady. What's the biggest lesson you've learned along the way?
Well, the 2 things that come to mind first are hire amazing people. That has been easily the biggest struggle that I've had. And I think when I get an incredible team together, like I see it right away in my revenue numbers. It's like, we're like, woo, right up the top. Mm-hmm. And then when I'm struggling with employees, we stagnate. And so that's a big thing for me. And in those times, I'm picking up a lot more of the work. And if I'm not out getting new business, we're not growing. And so I think for me, the biggest lesson is hiring incredible people, and then and mentoring them and training them. I have an all-female team, which I think is pretty unique in any business, frankly. People are, do you do that on purpose? Look, I just hire the best people. We just happen to be an all-female team. But incredible women who have, what the things I look for are great leadership skills. I want to mentor them. I want to see them fly and succeed. And so, and I talk to them about community benefits, and, we volunteer and we do those kind of things. I think that that's really important. It's a big part of who I am, is that sort of that give back. And we actually talk to our clients about that too, the companies we work with. How are you making your community better? Do we have a sponsorship opportunity that we can look at? So, that's external, but it's also internal to Durrell as well. So hiring good people is a big part of it. And then delegating, yes. Giving me that freedom. As you mentioned off the top, I'll work 18 hours a day, yeah. And I won't even know I'm doing it. It's funny. They just redid the streetscape outside of my office, and there's a new lamp in front of it, a street lamp. And, it goes on at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So but it's getting earlier. So it starts to go on earlier. But my husband always jokes, he's like, when that lamp comes on, you come home. So it means it's getting dark. So I really have to watch myself. But I do, I'm getting older, and I would like to have a little bit more time at home. And so I think that that's something I'm really looking for. I've spent 7 years really building this company. And while I do want to grow even more, I'd like to do it more as a president rather than the one who's actually, writing the op-ed or the communication strategy. So
right. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Melissa, thank you for
sharing.
Dream
goals, right? That's the goal. That's the goal. The hashtag big goal. See if you can help me with that, Sheila.
Well, you're making it happen, girl. You're already on it. I remember sitting across from the table. You had your lovely blue eyes on me, and I just stared you in the eye, and I'm like, okay, so you are now no longer writing copy. How's that feel? And it was
I was like, really? Do you really mean it? I don't think it's possible.
But anyway, Melissa, thank you for coming. And what you shared about the power of storytelling and aligning with clients who stand alongside what you stand for and not being afraid to be an advocate for causes that are important to you. Thank you for all of your teachings today. I think we all have a lot to learn from you. Where can people connect with you or find out more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, that'd be great. My Twitter is @Melissa Durrell. Facebook, same. My Instagram is Uptown Durrell, because I'm Uptown Waterloo, so Uptown Durrell. And then you can find Durrell Communications, which I would be honored and grateful if everybody wants to like them and all that jazz. So @DurrellComm, @DurrellComm. And we are on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
We'll put all those links in the show notes so that you can go and follow Melissa. She's just a breath of fresh air. And that storytelling piece, why should people care about you? What a great nugget for us to walk away from. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to learning more from you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Road to 7 podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes so you don't miss an episode. To learn more, visit SheilaCummins.com for more support along your road to 7 figures and beyond in your business. See you next time.